Hey everyone. We still have a few people logging in here, so we'll give them a minute or two to get settled and then we'll get underway. And hopefully I can get myself situated here. Okay. All right. Okay. I think we're going to get ready to go here. So thank you all for coming out for today's webinar, 4 Pillars to Long-Term Anxiety Management for Teen Girls and Young Adults. First, we'll get to a little bit of housekeeping here to get started. And today's webinar is going to be recorded, hopefully, if I did this right. And I'm going to, and I'd like to be able to share that with you. I'll send you a link after the event is complete. And I welcome you to revisit the content yourself and share with any colleagues that you have. Also, I invite you to comment. And if you have any questions, you can just go ahead and please look at the Q&A tab and I will try to answer questions as we go along. Or sometimes I might just wait to the very end where I hopefully will have some time where I can answer some other questions too. Okay. All right. So how about, okay, sorry, there we go. Now, before we get into some content, I like to give you a little background on me. My name is Renee McClure, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker who's been working with teens and their families for almost about 30 years now. About 20 years ago, I adjusted my practice to specialize in teen girls and young women with anxiety. I personally have had anxiety my whole life. I just didn't know that's what it was until I was in graduate school. After diagnosing myself with generalized anxiety, there we go, get myself situated here. I was sure I was sure that I had anxiety my whole life. I just didn't know that's what it was. And which really created this mission for me to help other girls not have to feel the way that I did. I also have 12-year-old triplets. I have one girl and two boys who are all in middle school right now and all have versions of their own kind of anxiety. So I'm in it myself, the full mess of parenting and learning things for my kids every single day. And trust me, it's not perfect. We're working on it every single day. All right. So let's take a look at what we're going to learn today and what we can go over. First, I'd like to go over how prevalent anxiety is in our kids, then the difference between anxiety and stress, how we recognize it at home and school, and then go over the 4 pillars of long-term anxiety management, as well as online therapy and exciting new opportunities that I'm offering to girls transitioning into college and adulthood. I'm really excited about some of those programs that I'd like to let you know about. So let's just get started with some statistics here. The National Institute of Mental Health reports that nearly 1/3 of teens have an anxiety disorder, while 8% of those teens have severe impairment as a result. And when we look at the split across gender, when you see that there, we're looking at it where 38% of female teens have an anxiety disorder. That's over 1/3 for females. And about a quarter of male teens have an anxiety disorder. And yet the statistic of all of it is only 1/3 of these kids actually get any help. Okay. And if left untreated, anxiety disorders, they tend to continue into adulthood and place children at risk for other problems like poor academic performance, depression, and drug dependence. So you can see it's really important that we try to be able to catch this as early as we can and be able to get our kids some understanding and some help with learning how to manage that. All right. So why kids don't get help? In my experience, it's for a few reasons. Okay. Many parents really don't know what to look for. Let me get over here. They really don't know what to look for and don't think what they're seeing is really a problem. Okay. Maybe they've been anxious their whole lives and didn't think it was that big of a deal that they got through it. If they do see it, many hope they'll just grow out of it and they take a wait and see approach. For others, just bringing up their concerns or talking to their kids about it causes their kids to get upset, more anxious, or it can create an argument or a meltdown, which they just really don't feel equipped to handle, or really just want to avoid that altogether. It can also be too stressful. Okay, for others, just bringing it up, which is what I just said. And for many bringing up their concerns, it's just embarrassing to talk about how their kids can react at home when they're really anxious. And they don't want other people to know because sometimes it can feel like your child is actually ruling the house. And a lot of parents don't really want to talk about that part of it. So, I think it's really important that we don't blame parents on this part of it. Parenting is a really hard job. And for me, I really think that parents are doing the best they can out there, all of them. Some have better support systems, some have better coping strategies themselves. Others can tend to battle the stigma that they grew up with about seeking out help or getting a therapist. For a lot of parents, it can be really lonely. And, it takes a lot of courage for them to reach out for help. And really judging anyone in this space, it's really not helpful. All right, so let's look at the difference between stress and anxiety. Let's start with stress. Stress is basically any demand that's placed on your brain or physical body. Any event or scenario that makes you feel frustrated or nervous can trigger it. Okay. Is one of those things that can be short term or long term. And short term stress is really something like a test is coming up, or a sporting event, you're getting ready for a big game, or a deadline that comes up with a project, or even for us at work, we have a webinar to put on and we have a deadline to get our stuff together for it. It can also just be a plain fight with a family or friend. That can be a short-term stress. It's uncomfortable. Now, short-term stress can actually be a good thing. It really helps girls build resilience, self-esteem, and increase performance. It's one of those things that can also help kind of change behavior. That little bit of stress of being in a fight with someone and not liking the feeling of that can put them into action. For long-term stress, what you're really looking at, that's like when girls are pushing themselves to do well in school and it's over a period of time, or when they have issues with their body. It's a stressor that they have of feeling bad about that or feeling bad about themselves in general. Having problems with parents or even a long-term illness in a family, that can be a long-term stress. And what we need to look at long-term stress for is that can be really harmful to girls' mental and physical health. Now, when we look at anxiety, the anxiety is really a feeling of fear, worry, or unease. Okay. While it can occur as a reaction to stress, it can also happen without an obvious trigger. So, what we're really looking at here is that with stress, you can actually know what's causing it. With anxiety, sometimes you just don't know. Oftentimes, I may have my son will come to me and be like, this is normal for the age, especially middle school, will be like, I just feel weird. I just feel weird. And so what we try to do is look like, okay, well, what's weird? And, my house, we're trying to name our feelings and doing the whole, I'm a therapist deal. But trying to get him to be able to talk about what that actually is. Okay. Um, and how that feels. I'm going to move this over a little bit here. Um, so that he can identify it. And then he'll be like, oh, I'm feeling anxious. And he'll be like, all right, I don't know exactly what it's about. So then we can kind of move into, we don't need to know the answer to it. We can move into some strategies, that type of thing. But like I said, with anxiety, we may just not know even what the trigger is. Now, the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, if I can say that 5 times, it'd be a miracle, um, really defines an anxiety disorder as excessive anxiety and worry occurring more days than not for at least 6 months across a number of events. And that's kind of such as like work or school performance on that part. So basically, like I said before, I think it's with stress, you can easily identify the cause. With anxiety, you don't have to know or even be able to identify it. It's just that feeling, that persistent and excessive worries that they might be having. So if we look at this, how do we recognize anxiety in our kids? What does it look like? Okay. How can we recognize this? And it's really important to know that kids can very easily get overlooked with anxiety. Okay. Especially girls on this part. So some can be really obedient and quiet because they're afraid of getting something wrong or getting in trouble. And so they absolutely can get overlooked. I think it's important to know too that anxiety can show up very differently in each girl. It can sometimes look like behavioral issues, but the other underlying issue is really something it's more along the lines of anxiety. And because look, I get referrals all the time for girls for angry outbursts, crying episodes, or like a lot of yelling that's going on at home. Moms particularly can feel really beaten up at times, and they think it's a behavioral thing when a lot of times these girls are looking like brats on the outside, but, when I see this behavior, I'm immediately looking at something about what's the underlying cause to this, and a lot of the time it's anxiety that we're looking at. And I think it's important to think about it this way. Middle school, high school, college, and just adulting in general, getting girls out of college and getting into the real world. Okay, this time period is ridiculously jam-packed with tons of change. Okay. And as exciting as change can be for some, for anybody with anxiety, they're not lovers of change. I'm not a lover of change for in the sense of, I do want something new every day. I like to have a structure. I like to have know what's kind of coming. And I think what happens for girls in this period of time is as soon as they start to get used to one phase of their life, it's immediately starting to change on them again, and they're pushed into another. So like those that are having difficulty managing the previous stage, they can struggle with the next. And then leading to where we get going, where I have a lot of girls that are afraid to grow up. They are not confident in their ability to what they think is managing the real world. And I think as adults, what we can do is we can unknowingly say, like, well, wait till you get in the real world. And because it stems from we're really worried as adult, we're like, okay, how are they going to make this? How are they going to be able to get out there in the real world and take care of their responsibilities? And yet, what we are really doing is we're telling them that we think they're inept and they're not going to be able to meet the challenge. So, in changing that part of it, we're looking at girls that are going through all these different changes rapidly. And what we're trying to do is help give them confidence to be able to be able to manage that part. And we forget that everyone struggles. And, you know, that's what support is for. So that's how girls learn. And so when we're looking at this, like, we're going to look at some symptoms here and behaviors that we might see in your anxious daughters. Um, and here are some of them right now. But I think it's a thing to remember that this time period, it isn't supposed to be easy. No one's supposed to go through it seamlessly. We have to make mistakes and things are going to be really uncomfortable sometimes. So if we look at some of the physical symptoms here that we have for girls with anxiety, it can look like they're feeling like they might be saying, I'm feeling nervous, they're restless or tense, having a sense of impending danger, panic, or doom. And a lot of that can go along with like some panic attack type of things. But you may hear that language that comes like that impending danger. Having an increased heart rate or breathing rapidly, sweating, trembling, feeling weak or tired, trouble concentrating or thinking about anything other than the present worry. Also having trouble sleeping. Sleeping is one of the most important things for us to be able to have good mental health, and most of us don't get it. GI problems. One of the things girls will often show up with when they come to see me is that they feel sick to their stomachs all the time. It's usually they'll come to me after they've been to a specialist and like ruled out every other thing from the doctor standpoint. And when it's still there, they usually say, maybe you should see a therapist and see what this might be about. And usually it is an element of anxiety. Having difficulty controlling their worry and having the urge to avoid things that trigger anxiety. Okay, when we look at some of the behavioral symptoms that you're going to see, and this is what I think a lot of parents will end up calling me with, is that some behavioral symptoms that you might see are really, we're looking at irritability, yelling and arguing, avoidance, just avoiding anything that really makes them feel uncomfortable, clinginess. Okay. A lot of times I'll get parents that'll be like, okay, why do they want to be with me so much? Like I didn't want to be with my parents this much. The clinginess can have a lot to do with just trying to manage the anxiety. Having low frustration tolerance or helplessness, not being able to do anything on their own. That kind of the controlling and bossy behavior, like it has to be their way. And if we veer off from what the plan was, we're going to see a meltdown. Also needing continued reassurance. Like everything's okay. You're not mad at me. You're not mad at me, right? You're okay. You're not mad at me. Um, and along the OCD lines of things like some excessive organizing or things have to be a specific way before getting things done. I tend to see a lot of that, especially since my kids are in middle school right now. Things have to be a certain way because they think that this can only be, we call it middle school brain in my house. My kids don't like it. But I know when I'm talking to them being like, okay, this is middle school brain right now. You're not even listening to any like possible solutions here. And it really is stemming from their anxiety. So on flips, like on when we're looking at school, what we're looking at is, you might hear from teachers difficulty concentrating in class, avoiding participating in class discussions. That's a big one. A lot of kids with anxiety, they do not want to have any attention on them in class. They're afraid to answer questions. They're afraid to be judged. And it kind of comes up with not wanting to participate. A lot of these girls, okay, nobody really likes doing group projects. Okay. Someone always ends up doing, most of my girls with anxiety are the ones that do all the work because they need to get it done. And all of you can, identify with this part of it, but for girls with a lot of anxiety, this can be really difficult for them to be able to participate in that type of thing. Sometimes you can just see disruptive behavior. They're just disruptive because they're trying to avoid what's going on in class. The idea of perfectionism, and I don't want to spend much time on this. I'm hoping to be able to do another webinar in May that I'll specifically be addressing pieces of perfectionism. And I think Brene Brown years ago, I think it was in The Gifts of Imperfection that she wrote, was really kind of life-changing for me when I started looking at perfectionism as more of a coping strategy and not of feeling like it's a personality trait. So looking at perfectionism in that space of as a coping strategy, if I do this perfectly, no one will judge me. And that resonates with a lot of girls that I talk to when we start working on their perfectionism because they can make things really hard on themselves and they don't give themselves any latitude to learn, make mistakes, and be able to do better on that part of it. There's also the other piece of trouble in interacting with others. It's that piece where sometimes it can be so controlling, they just have a hard time um, really being able to get along with others. And then the frequent trips to the nurse or bathroom. God bless Mrs. Small. And when my kids were young, she had my daughter used to visit her all the time in first grade. They used to like her first grade teacher used to roll her up in um, paper towels and give her an ice pack and everything else because she used to say she was sick all the time. It worked. It worked with my daughter very well to try to have some levity with that whole part of it. But it was her trying to manage some of her anxiety. She was at the nurses quite often. Everybody has a school nurse that they at one point or another they move through that they love. Mrs. Small, who's retired, she was the best. But now, if you see these things in your daughter yourself, they may not be due to an anxiety disorder, okay? But you want to pay attention to them because this is often how girls' anxiety will display itself. So we want to keep an eye on that part of it, okay? Um, the other part is that, when parents contact me about services for kids, I often hear them say, like, I think they just need a few coping strategies and that they'll be fine. That's all they need. If you can just teach her a couple coping strategies. And honestly, I wish it was that easy. I wish it was true. Truly, I would have, or I wouldn't have had to do the work that I had to do working with managing my own anxiety. But I mean, look, there are hundreds. Okay, maybe that's an exaggeration, but there's a lot. There's probably at least 100 books out there and hundreds of online articles with lists of coping strategies out there. If all we needed were just strategies, I wouldn't even have a job. Okay. Because you could just read the list. I would have read the list and things would have gotten better and I would have been great. Most teens and young adults, they're resistant to using those strategies anyway. Okay. Now, why do you ask? Well, that's a good question because that's where the four pillars come in. Okay. When we're working with teens and young adults, I found that there are four pillars to helping them or anyone else really manage their anxiety long term, but especially teens and young adults. That these are the four things that came up over and over and over again that I felt that when girls got a good base of this, we got to see some real progress with what we were doing with them managing their anxiety. And now the first pillar, that's education. Okay. Education is about helping girls understand what's going on in their bodies and their brain. And I mean, it's crucial for them to know what's going on there and why they react the way they do from like a physiological standpoint when they're anxious, because it helps them stress less about that. It's when we talked about the girls that get sick to their stomach, when they know what's going on, after I teach them about what's going on in their brain, I teach them about the fight or flight response, about their sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, like how they, and trust me, it's basic knowledge on this whole thing. We're not doing a deep dive. It's just enough for them to be able to make connections. And then the physical symptoms that come with those things, it really helps them understand why certain coping strategies really do help, like a deep breath or a grounded breathing. Now, whenever I mention taking a deep breath, I get eye rolls every single time. I even give girls permission when I talk with them. I'll say, "All right, here we go. I'm going to bring up taking a deep breath and feel free to go ahead and roll your eyes." I would have rolled my eyes too when I was their age because I had no idea. I was trying to employ a deep breath when I was already really super anxious. Okay. And I didn't trust it. Okay. And I'm telling you, 90% of the girls that I see are going to roll their eyes when I bring that up. So when I explain to them why and how taking a deep breath really does work in a way that makes sense to them, it makes it more desirable for them to practice it. And once they know that taking what it does, that it really helps them get their brain back online, they're more than willing to practice and use it. And it absolutely does need to be practiced when they're not anxious so that they'll trust it when they are anxious. So helping them make some of those connections in their brain about being like, okay, my amygdala is in charge right now. That means I just cut off my whole prefrontal cortex where I do all of my problem solving. And I want to get that back online. So it's being able to take a deep breath. Not to mention, I'm in fight or flight. So when all of us nice parents, myself included, I still do it, tell our kids, like, okay, just take a breath. They're already in fight or flight. And that's why they want to punch us. Okay. The fight's right there. And they don't want to listen to a thing that we're saying. When we explain to them, like, oh my gosh, you're right. I do. Like, I get so angry when someone tells me. That's why when someone tells you to relax, it's annoying. Because you've got all this stuff going on and you can't get to that problem solving point that you're just into the reaction part of things. Okay. So by being able to give them some education on what's going on in their body, it helps it make sense for them. And it says like, okay, this is why we take a deep breath. Okay. It does work. Okay. I don't care what you say. It works. We just have to practice it. And one of the things that I'll do, I'll give this piece. One of the things that I'll do is that girls don't want to take a lot of extra time to do things. Like I'm not going to tell them like, I need you to meditate for 30 minutes at night. I mean, okay, if they wanted to do that, great. I'm all for it. But most girls are really busy. One of the things that I'll have them do is, most schools when they're, switching classes and everything, they maybe have like 8 periods a day. And what I ask them to try to do is that when they go to each class throughout the day, at the beginning of the class, they have to go and sit down in their seat. I want them when they sit down to try to take a nice, deep, grounded breath. That's it. Just one time they have to practice it. And what it does is it helps them get practice doing it, but it also helps them get, settled and focused for that class. So anything that they might have had going on, they can get a little bit more centered. And the beauty of it is I remind them like, okay, guess what? You have to breathe. So no one knows what you're doing. They don't know what the intent is behind your breath because everybody's got to breathe. They don't know what's happening. So you can do it without anybody really realizing what's actually going on. All right, the second pillar is awareness. And this is really helping girls gain self-awareness of how their own anxiety shows up. Like, what does it look like? What are the behaviors, the feelings, the thoughts, the actions or inaction that they experience when they get anxious? Now, every girl has their own flavor of how it shows up for them. And when we're more aware of those tendencies and what to look for, they can course correct and when they can see what's coming. So, for example, for me, when I get anxious, I get irritable and I'm kind of a brat. And actually, I can be mean. Now, I would like to say I don't get that way very often now, because I know how to manage it. I know when I have that kind of like mean thought, I usually can catch it and be like, okay, stop. You don't want to say that out loud. Like that's not a good thing. Usually it's my husband and I when that part of it comes up. And I can kind of dial it back. Or if it does slip out, he often will look at me like, okay, what's up? Because I don't normally talk to him that way. And it's helping girls kind of figure out, do they really, it's part of it when they're anxious, do they get quiet? Do they tend to withdraw? Do they get more aggressive? It's helping them get like having that awareness of what's happening for them helps them feel a little bit more in control of it. Okay. The third pillar, that's self-compassion. I'm going to tell you this right now. I used to think that awareness, like many, many years ago, I used to think awareness was probably the most important of all of them. It is not. It is definitely self-compassion. That is the one that we all struggle with the most, and is absolutely the most important. And when we're talking about self-compassion, we're looking at like, okay, how kind are these girls to themselves? Girls that are anxious, they tend to be really hard on themselves. The way they talk to themselves in their head, it's awful. Okay. In fact, if they talk to their friends the way they talk to themselves in their head, and any girl that might be listening this is going, oh my God, yeah, I do. They wouldn't have any friends if they talk to them the way they do themselves in their head. It's pretty much a fact. And I think a lot of that can sometimes feel that if they aren't hard on themselves, then they're going to like turn into like a slacker or not accomplish anything. Like they feel like they need to be really hard on themselves to accomplish anything. And that's just not true. The truth is that they can learn to be nice to themselves and they can find a much more pleasant way to go about their business and learn from their mistakes or setbacks without having to chip away at their self-esteem. And it's important for them to learn that piece because when we're trying to learn how to manage our anxiety, what's so important about it is that we have to try different things. We have to practice. Okay. And, I could go into my whole Allen Iverson, the whole thing about practice, but we are talking about practice. We have to practice different things so that helps us rewire our brain. And, a lot of girls with anxiety tend to feel like they're hardwired to be negative. Okay. And it is like super negative, especially during my 20s. A lot of my girls that see me now, they'll make fun of me, be like, hey, why are you always coming up with something positive out of this? And that was not an easy thing for me to do 30 years ago. um, I had to learn how to do that. And I think what it is that, they're always looking for something that could go wrong so that they can be prepared and manage it. And when we look at our anxiety in that way of being like, okay, our anxiety is trying to help us in some ways because it's trying to find every problem that's there so we can solve it before it happens. And then it's predictable and we're going to be okay. But what happens is that we just get this negative cycle that goes on and they don't have the skills to see their way out of it. And all that negativity it keeps them stuck and it keeps them from trying new things. So helping girls learn how to be kind to themselves while they're practicing new ways of being is absolutely essential. It's a game changer on that part of it. So the good news is that girls can learn to be more positive and kinder to themselves. It's a skill that we can build. You know, really years ago, I probably was 24, and I was working at an agency. I was out of college. I had not started my master's program yet, and I was working at a community agency, and we had an intern there, and his name was Derek. And I feel so sad because I don't know Derek. I don't remember Derek's last name, but he was such a nice and positive guy. And I would come in every single morning with some kind of fiasco going on. I think it was part of my coping thing that I would just kind of like complain about, like, oh my gosh, I spilled coffee on this morning, or I couldn't get out the door. It was ridiculous. And the one day he said to me, he said to me, and he was so kind, he goes, Renee, he's like, does anything good ever happen to you? And it was like I got kicked in the stomach. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am that girl. I am that girl that complains about everything. It was so disturbing for me. I was thinking about it all day long. I went home at night. I went back to my house. I'm sitting on my couch and I'm going, all right, this is not going to work for me. Now, I had no idea that I had anxiety at the time. And I didn't know really even what that, like, I didn't know that that could be something that could happen to me. And that night I made a decision. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was like, okay, you know what? I am just going to, every time I have like want to say one of those negative thoughts or like say something or complain about something, I am going to match it with something that's positive. And it got me started and got me to the point where now I still have the negative thought. These girls are still going to have a negative thought. What we're hoping for them is that the negative thought happens, but they can so quickly switch it to something positive. Okay. That's the wiring we're trying to create for them. I think it's important to be like, okay, like to let girls know, like, you're always going to have the negative thought. It's okay. It's there. You know, we can learn to laugh at it. We can learn to just move past it. But it's one of those things that when we get good at it, it really helps us move to a sense of humor where we do a lot of weird stuff when we're anxious. Okay. These girls, if we can teach them how to be kind to themselves and have a sense of humor about what they're experiencing, it's one of the most essential coping strategies that we can have, in my opinion. So the fourth one, here we go. We made it to this. This is where all those tools that parents call me about, this is where they come in. It's only after they have a better idea of what's going on with them, what their anxiety looks like, and how they can be kinder to themselves, that now I can teach them skills that they're really actually going to use. Okay. I can give them tools they need to manage their anxiety while they're also then creating a self-care routine that shows them how to manage their anxiety in the long term. So we're looking at these tools that we're going to give them, and we're looking at how do we arrange these things or set things up for ourselves so that we can use them on a daily basis. It's just part of our regular self-care that we just do it so often, we don't think about it any longer. Now, I think there's a part of knowing that not all strategies are going to work for all girls. Okay. Except breathing. I will die on that hill. Okay. Breathing is the basis for every skill that's out there. I'm sure of it. So, you know, we're really going to look for things that work for them personally. Okay. So ASMR, which is um, autonomous sensory meridian response. I think that's what it is. I always call it ASMR, and I always forget what it stands for. And really, it's kind of like it's this gentle stimulus to like a particular sound. So it could be like clicking on a desk, or it could be like, I don't even want to do it because it freaks me out. It could be whispering in a microphone. It could be, sometimes it's chewing. Now I have girls that love that. They put it on before they go to bed. It calms everything down. That activates me like nobody's business. It is not something, girls laugh so hard. I used to have a girl that would come to a session and she would try to find the worst ASMR YouTube video that she could and bring it and bring it to me and show it to me at a session, because she loved ASMR, but she knew it kind of freaked me out. And we would laugh so hard. I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's not going to work. But she would try to top herself every week. But my thing is, like, if it works for one of my clients, I'm all for it. Doesn't matter. It's what works for them. And, the whole idea is about figuring out specific ones that they respond to. And they can also change over time. Okay. So it's helping girls, learn how to try new things when something doesn't feel as effective any longer. What may work for them in middle school may not work for them in high school or college. Okay. Um, There'll be some things that they just don't like at all. And we move on to something else. Now, because I think it's important to remember that all of us inevitably get off track at times. Okay. Life happens, it's what it is. And when girls know what it is they need to feel grounded or balanced, it's not as scary when they get off track because then they can come back and be like, okay, these are the things that I know I need to get sleep. I'm not eating well. I need to drink more water. I need to get outside and be in nature or exercise. It's them knowing what those things are. It's much easier for them to go, oh yeah, you know what? I'm not doing these things. And I know I really need to do this to keep myself on track. And then we just make a quick plan of how we get back to doing the things that make them feel good. And I think the thing is that without all four of these pillars, girls are going to struggle and not utilize those tools that they've been taught. Without knowing the why, they rarely see the point of practicing these skills or using them. I can't tell you the countless times I have like, well, you're not using what Renee taught you. I'm like, girls will tell me like, yeah, my mom was yelling at me that I'm not using, like, why are we even going to therapy? Because I'm not using what was taught. And we had that conversation about being like, okay, well, do you know why these are helpful to you again? Um, and if we don't do that, they're not really going to use them. And understanding these things really does, like, it helps them get more invested and helps them see it as more of a long-term management system that they can rely on as they grow up. And I mean, the reality is that anxiety management, it's really not all that sexy. It's pretty basic stuff. The trick is really how we incorporate it in our lives. And this whole idea is to help girls be more confident and resilient. And that's what these four pillars do. When we put them and we have them working together, girls can feel that things can happen and they can pick themselves up. And they're confident they can do that moving forward. All right. So here we go. After going through the four pillars, I always get a lot of questions about medication. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I will address it because usually that's what I get a question on. Is that this is my feeling on medication. Unless I see a girl that is acutely struggling with managing their anxiety, I always try to see if we can take them through the four pillars first and see what kind of progress that we're going to get. Often though, when girls first come to see me, sometimes their anxiety is so acute that we can't even get to the four pillars. There's too much going on. And what we're needing to do is look at medication so that we can bring them from up here to about here where they can start to hear me and the people around them to be able to help them. So a lot of the medications that will work that we work with a lot of the ones that my girls will see, it's usually a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor or an SSRI. They've been around for a really long time. They work very well with the girls that I see. And as much as I don't start off in that direction, I am not afraid to be able to employ them with girls that I can see are struggling. Um, and I've seen it make a huge difference in a lot of girls' lives. So, we take each, girl individually and seeing what's going on. I usually always try to see, unless they're coming to me and they've been through it for a long time. Every once in a while, I'll get girls that I'm just like, yeah, I think we need to look at medication first here. Usually it's been brought up to them beforehand, but now they're kind of more open to it because it's just been so difficult. So, medication wise, I'm not a rush to do it, but I'm also not afraid of it if I see a girl that's really anxious. Which now kind of gets us to that place of even just finding a therapist. Okay, that can be super frustrating right now. The system is totally overworked, and there aren't enough therapists for those that need them. And that's really why, one of the reasons why I chose to take my practice fully online. Okay. Um, as my old children have also gotten older, have a second job as an unpaid Uber driver, taking everybody all over the place. And being online has also helped me put girls into time slots that I may not have had before if I had to see them in person. Um, so, when we're looking at online therapy, these are some of the things that we can kind of keep in mind. And I think it's happened because over the past 4 years, you know, one of the things that I'll get from a lot of girls, like, well, she really wants to see somebody in person. And there are definite, like, a lot of people would like to see things in person. And yet, what I found over the past, like, since the pandemic started, is that really, it's really about rapport. Okay. Rapport is the greatest indicator of success in therapy, whether the sessions are in person or online. And most girls, what they're looking for is somebody that's just empathetic, friendly, and knows what they're talking about. Okay. One of the things that I am very proud about is that I talk to teenagers and young adults every day. Like, that's what I do. I know what affects them and I know what they're up against and the weird things that they're up against too, where there are days where I'm like, you do what? And girls will be more than happy to explain that to me because I've already met them more than halfway. Because girls can actually see the difference in someone who sees teens and young adults and someone who just kind of dabbles in it. They want to know, they want someone who really knows what it's like to be a teenager or a young adult right now and have realistic strategies that help them feel better and more confident in themselves of, like, how to problem solve some of these things. Now, okay, keep in mind, I am really the very opposite of cool. I don't even pretend to be with these girls. We joke around about giving them my old lady advice. And oftentimes when they'll say, like, what do I do with this? I think it's important to be able to say, okay, let me think about what I would say now as a grown woman, and then we're going to turn it into what is more age appropriate for where you're at. But I'm going to keep in mind what you're going through and what um, all the different things that come into play now, not when I was a teenager, but what you're experiencing now. And, you know, most often I tell them things that they're the same things that their parents do in a lot of ways. Just because I'm not their parent, I get to be brilliant. So any of you out there that think that that's absolutely unfair, that I get to bask in brilliance, rest assured, my children think I know nothing. Okay. It just really, we're looking at, like, I'm a firm believer in who cares about the messenger as long as they get the message. So when we look at some of these things, that we have, the benefits of online is that we're looking at time. Okay. It's easy to get to. You don't have to drive. There's no waiting rooms. I hardly have any girls that miss appointments, even if they're like, oh my gosh, I forgot. It's really easy for them to get online, um, and, be comfortable in their own space. For a lot of my girls that go off to college, especially if we're doing that piece of therapy, I can see them when they go off to college and they don't have to tell their whole story all over again if they don't want to. And really, the number one reason why girls will shy away from online sessions is that they feel like they're going to be overheard by somebody. Okay. So privacy can be hard for some girls because they're just afraid either their parents, their siblings, or even their roommates will listen in. But I'm going to tell you something. My girls get extraordinarily creative of what they do. I am, they will rent out study rooms at the library when they're at college. I have girls that have their sessions in the car. My one girl, she still does it to this day, but during the pandemic, she would go to Dunkin' Donuts, get herself some coffee, and then park in the parking lot. And we would have our session with her in the car because nobody could hear her. She was in a enclosed space. She could go out and get Dunkin'. She figured out a way to make it work. I also have another girl that does it in their car, in the garage, sorry, because she gets the Wi-Fi reaches the garage and nobody can hear anything. And it was, for her, there was a couple things that she was working through that she wasn't quite ready to share. with her siblings or anything, and she just didn't want anyone to overhear her. Now she finds it more comfortable to do it in the car anyway. So they can get very creative and figure out how to be able to do that. I mean, because it really is important that girls feel like they have a safe space to talk without the worry of being overheard, being overheard. And, with that set in place, as well as good rapport, the benefits of online therapy really outweigh that reticence. So if you hear that from your girls and you're looking for someone, it might be really hard to find someone, whether it's seeing me or anyone else. It can be really hard to find somebody um, in person. Hang on one second. I got a question here. Okay. My daughter's in ninth grade this year, and I have started to notice some minor changes in her, mainly withdrawing from social activities. Um, it isn't terrible at this point, and I'm not sure if it's time to send her to a therapist. Do you think this is a phase, or should I have her see someone? Um, you know what? First of all, I would ask her. I would see if she would be interested in seeing someone. If she says no, you might want to pay attention. If she's like really adamant about not seeing someone, you want to pay attention to that too. I think it's important to remember as parents, um, if you feel like there's something wrong, I think you need to be the parent and say, okay, I understand that you don't want to go, but we're going to do this at least 3 times, and we'll see if you like the person, and we'll see what happens. You can oftentimes have girls that will be like, well, I'm not going to go. It's a waste of money. You can't make me do this. Like, I'll go. This is you, like, I'll go, but you can't make me talk, and I'm just going to waste your money. That's usually how it goes. And to me, I said, all right, well, bring it in. Like, come on in. I can manage that. I've had girls that have sat there for a whole session and haven't said a word, but have been able to kind of talk to them about different things, to try to help build that part of the rapport. I think it's really important, um, to be able to let your kids know you care about them enough that you're okay if they're mad at you, because they need more than that part of it. Okay. I'm going to come back to that one. Were anxiety levels like this 20 years ago? Absolutely not. I would no, it is definitely, there's so many studies out there that they're just showing that depression and anxiety have just keep increasing and increasing. I think when I was doing this probably 10 years ago, and I did something similar to this other webinar that I'm going to put together. We were looking, it was like a quarter of all teens had an anxiety disorder. And now I'm doing this, and it's 1/3 of teens have anxiety disorders. And I would probably say what we're really looking at is they're just impacted by so many different things that I think as adults, we never had to deal with. I was just talking to um, my son about my kids don't have Snapchat. Okay. And for a lot of reasons, we've chosen not to do Snapchat. One of the things about that is we were talking about the location piece on that. And my girls, there's a lot of anxiety that goes on with being able to have the locator, the part, so that everybody can see where they're at and you can see where everybody else is at. Okay. 20 years ago, you could go hang out with a friend and just hang out with them and it not be that big of a deal. And nobody knew about that. Now you go to hang out with a friend, everybody knows about it. And you have tons of girls that are feeling left out all the time. It is not, in fact, I think I just saw a thing with, I think it is with Snapchat, that they were talking about how, important it was for them to really support teens on that. Well, that is one feature that I think only adds anxiety to other people. It's kind of like a look at me, I'm, so busy, I'm with other people. Um, but you're seeing other kids that are being like, oh my gosh, like the comparison that happens is it's a really big deal that we never had to deal with when we were younger. I mean, look, just even the fact of text messages. Okay. You could, and when you're younger and in middle school and you don't know how to keep your mouth shut, trying to get somebody to like you or say something funny, you might say something behind somebody's back. And if they came to you, you could deny it. Now it's all on text messaging and they've got screenshots and everything else. You can't get out of anything of that part of it and realize, oh my gosh, that was not cool to do. I'm not ever going to do that again. It comes with so much more consequence now. So yeah, absolutely. The levels were not even, I don't feel like they were even close to what they are right now. All right, so let me just get back to this part of it quickly. We do have things that are coming up that I am doing. I'm hoping in the month of May, I'm going to be doing that bit of a deeper dive into that piece with anxiety that really helps you. Um, well, it's like this. If you or someone else is really interested in taking that deeper dive, it's going to really help you get more information about how teens experience it, their anxiety, and just more of how to be able to handle that, of understanding that stuff that's going on in the brain, and how even as parents, you can have greater understanding so that you can support them better and know where and how and when to set boundaries with that, just because you have a better idea of how that goes. Now, something I am really excited about, and I've worked really hard on this, and I want to call out my niece, Juliana. She worked so hard on me, hard on this with me, of putting together these coaching packages. And let me go over here. I'm on the wrong spot. And what they are, there's 3 packages that I have that are coming out that are, one of them is a college prep package, a transition to college package, and an adulting package that they come up. And all 3 of these packages have like an over 100-page workbook and includes one-on-one sessions with me, a check-in with parents, and where they can email and text me, and check-ins throughout college when they get there and with how they're doing. And I am so proud of these, in the fact that these are a lot of things that I was doing with clients to begin with. And I was able to put something specific together, because when we look at this, when we're looking at girls going off to college, they are extremely unaware, or overestimate, let's put it this way, they severely overestimate their ability to be able to transition into college, and think that it's going to be easier than they think it is. And I think when we have this, we can set them up to be able to have a better, more clear idea of what that's going to look like, and help them feel more confident of how to meet new friends, and how to be able to go through all those different things of being more responsible for themselves, getting their schoolwork done, how they balance their social activities and being at school, how they manage loneliness, and figuring out how they want to present themselves moving forward into school. So I'm really super proud of these, and they're also a great gift to give new grads. But if anyone is interested in that, or anyone else that is interested in that, absolutely, you can contact me, you can email me, or call me and look to be able to set up a 20-minute inquiry that I can talk a little bit more about it and how it might be helpful to your daughters or someone that you might know. So I have one more question here that I have up here, unless anybody else has anything else that comes up. Um, and this one is, okay, I'm struggling with the relationship with my 16-year-old daughter. I feel like I'm trying my best to be there for her, but her moods can be really exhausting for me, and I end up snapping at her. Welcome to the club. And my kids aren't even 16. Our relationship feels like it is deteriorating. Oh, hang on. I got to get my mouse up here. Is deteriorating, and it's kind of heartbreaking for me. If my daughter started seeing a therapist, would I be able to get feedback how to best communicate with her and mend our relationship and help her feel supported? You absolutely should. Yes, you absolutely should. I think it is really important. There is a real piece that I think that girls need to know, that what they talk about in session is confidential. It stays between the therapist and the client. I think it is very important from this part, where I will talk to girls and I will tell them, listen, what you and I say to each other stays between us. If there is something that we're talking about that I really think your mom and dad should know, because I think they should be able to be supportive of you, I am going to tell you. And then I'm giving you, then they have the option to be able to tell me, no, I don't want you to talk to my parents about that. And then, but they also have to tell me why it's not a good idea. Okay. I have had only one time ever, really one time ever, that I have had a girl that said, no, you cannot talk to my parents about this. And and I asked her why. And she had a really good reason. And to be honest, part of it was she was about 3 months away from turning 18. And in this particular situation, she was really coming to me on her own, and her family issues. Her mom and dad really were not. There was some other issues going on with her mom and dad that it would not have been a supportive situation. And when I learned more about that piece, I understood what she was saying. And that was only one time that ever happened. Usually if I'm bringing it up and I'm saying, I think we need to talk to your mom and dad about this, they are relieved. And I'm also telling them that I'll do it with them. I'm not going to have you do this on your own. We can do it together. And I can, ease that part into it. So yes, like they need to know that's where I come from, that I'm looking at it. Like if I was a mom, I would want to know this. What is going to be the best way to be able to get that communication between parents and daughter working so that they can be supportive of one another. And yes, I would absolutely talk with moms about how to, and dads, and how to talk with their kids so they can really kind of get that communication better. I often tell girls, like, listen, I'm telling your mom to do this when you are acting this way. And it takes some pressure off the parents on that, of that. But I think it's important for girls to know, like, we're working on this whole thing. Like, this is about you being able to have a wider support system. I don't want you to just have me. I want you to have more than that. Okay. And then to do that, we may have to bring your parents in, and we may have to realize, okay, there's going to be some things that you and your parents are not ever going to agree on, but how do we find the best way to communicate that and have the best relationship that you can together? Sorry, this is up on my thing here. So yeah, I mean, that's usually how I would handle that part of it. It is hard. It is heartbreaking. I think you have a lot of people, like when girls are going through things, they also don't know how to communicate what's going on with them and don't feel heard. And I think for, moms, we can have our own anxiety that goes on, and we may be saying things to them that is about our anxiety, and they're like, yeah, like I'm cool. Oftentimes I'll say to my one son, I'm like, all right, I know you don't care about this and this is not really even a problem, but I'm feeling anxious about this. Can I just get this out here and feel like I feel better that I at least told you how to handle this situation? And he looks at me and laughs and kind of rolls his eyes like, yeah, all right, whatever. I'm like, okay, thanks, I feel better about that. So it's absolutely a common thing that can go along with that. So all right, you know what? I would just like to thank all of you for being here tonight, and all those that might be listening on the recording. I really hope that this part of it was helpful. And I thank you for the questions. Let me just see. Wait, there might be one more, because I might have time for one more and see what that is. Okay. Recently, my daughter's starting to have panic attacks. They have been scary to witness, and I don't know what to do. Should I have her see someone straight away, or is there something I can do in the meantime to help with the panic attacks with her? Get a therapist. Yeah, you want to get her to see someone. Like I would try to see if you get her to see someone quickly. I think that I guess what I would say more so than anything is that what can you do in the meantime to help her panic attacks? You know what? I think the biggest part of it is probably you're going to want to try to get her to see someone so they can have a better idea of what's going on. Um, but I think all you can do is be as supportive as you can. I think it's trying to help her slow things down when they have panic attacks. I think, sometimes it's associated with, um, it might be certain triggers, but a lot of time panic attacks, we just don't know that they're coming. And really, it's going to be handled much better, probably with a combination of a therapist and a doctor of trying to figure out what that is. I don't know if that was the best way to answer that. But I think that you're going to want to try to get both of those things set up sooner rather than later, because panic attacks can be really scary for girls. And when they're panicking, there's not really anything you can do in that moment except to be there and support them and help it dissipate. Okay. All right. Those are great questions. Thank you so much for all of those. If any of you still have any other questions, you can absolutely contact me at Renee@reneemcclure.com or give me a call. Also, I think the other part, please, check out my website. I am hoping to have another website or webinar coming up, and really going to be posting a lot more things about these college prep and adulting packages. And again, thank you so much. This is great. Thank you for so much for taking your time out to listen to this. And I hope you all have a great evening. Thank you.